Welcome to MedMen. My name is Pim. This is Andy.
And today we have a very special episode because for the first time ever, we have a guest. Welcome to the show, Caroline. It's great to see you. How are you?
I'm amazing. This is great to be on the show. I've been watching it for as long as it started, and I'm excited to be on it.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming over because I know you don't live in London where we are today. Where are you living now?
Near Lisbon.
Near Lisbon. Brilliant. Brilliant. Good stuff. So for those that don't know you, maybe give us a quick introduction about how you got into this wonderful world of sales and some of your experience and all that kind of good stuff.
How did I get in sales? Well, by accident, like pretty much everybody. 20 years ago, by accident. Yeah. It started with big companies, as you know, like the Computer Associates and the Oracle and so on, which are good for methodologies. Then I went to the States. And then when I came back from the States, I joined BMC. And that was, what put me on the path of why we're here today. I think we'll talk a little bit about MEDDIC, maybe. And then I moved down to more like exciting startups, scale-ups like Sprinkler and Datadog, which are also playbook MEDDIC companies. And for the last 4 years, I've been on my own, building a consulting boutique company and helping European startups and scale-ups with their playbook and more, GTM and everything.
I love it.
Yeah, no, so cool. I think that what you said there, like startups and scale-ups, some of these logos are now known as pretty big companies, right?
They are.
What was your timing and what was it like at the time?
Early. We opened a bunch of new logos with Sprinkler, and for Datadog, same thing. I was pretty much first on the ground building the team for South Europe, so very early. Back then, Datadog was not what Datadog is now. I think there are, like, every day, I'm talking to people and say, "Oh, you're a MEDDIC person." Like, what does this mean? It's like, you're one of those. Right. It becomes like a religion or something. And I always say, I was all my life. It's just like it was given to me as a framework that I finally understood because. All of this is art, right? Those companies, they scale based on the passion of people, the art and the talent of the people. All it brings to the table is the science to do it repeatedly. And so when you do this across the board of the different product now is looking at MEDDIC seriously because it's like, oh, we're going to create this new feature. Amazing. Why? Oh, we'll look at the product market fit letter. I'm like, how many people are going to work on this feature? For how long? Because if you don't know, think problem market fit. What is the pain you're fixing with this feature, right? So product is also looking now. And it all makes sense because MEDDIC is not a methodology, as you've said it a number of times, but it is the science behind how to operate efficiently across all departments of a scaling company. And that's why I think startups and scale-up really understand how important it is for them because you create silos super fast when you scale super fast.
Yeah. And one of the things I love about the common language, that's like the most beautiful way of selling because, your storytelling, your reference selling, you're not having to go in and, ask those ridiculous discovery questions of what keeps the person awake at night and who else cares about this. You're just going in and saying, look, we believe we can help you because we've done it before, but not just done it before, we've done it with your peer brand. And here's the value they saw. Don't you want the same? And if you want to go and talk to this person who is your peer, because you know they're their peer, because they're both the potential champion and the champion, you bring them together. But I think that's in a sales cycle. But in product, what you were talking about there is like using that same sort of logic of here's what we're seeing in the field as pain that our customers are having, and using that information to inform the product team of what they should be focusing their time on. The greatest way MEDDPICC helps with this is to start looking at the elements in for product teams to look at those elements and say, when we win, what is the decision criteria why we're winning? When we lose, what's the decision criteria we're missing? And if you're a product team, and I'm not a product expert, but if I was leading a product team and I had this language I could tap into, just go and put my ear into and just start saying, hang on a minute, when we win, it's for these reasons. And when we lose, it's for these reasons. I'm going to go, well, what that thing we're losing for, we can fix that. We can build that. And what better reinforcement you need than actually seeing that it's going to win you more deals. Now, then the product team builds it. And then the marketing team goes, okay, we've got to now do some marketing for this new feature we've got, right? And they go, okay. They go, well, hang on a minute. Why don't we actually put it into the language that the sales team, the SDR team, the channel team are using? Let's just give it to them so they can then just go and talk to the customers about it exactly how customers want to hear about it. Like I said, storytelling, reference selling, showing you've done your research, leading with value. It's just the best. And so when you're so right when you're talking about how people kind of have this perspective of MEDDIC, and it's because, like you said, I hadn't heard it put that way before, but used as an efficiency framework. I think that's a really clever way of putting it, because we tend to talk about people seeing that the people you're talking about, the mindset you're talking about, we say that they see it just as a qualification framework, and we think it's so much more. But it's also really important to do qualification. So it's almost like we don't want to throw shade on qualification, but if you kind of just sort of put that into isolation in a silo as just the thing that MEDDIC does, and then you need these other languages, right? MEDDIC's just qualification. So, when it comes to, selling, you're going to need our something of something trademark to do it. And that's going to mean you're going to have to fly in a load of consultants, spend millions on building a new language when the one you've got already works perfectly.
Yeah, that's where it exceeds just qualification, right? Because as you're effectively using an M1 to do discovery, and so then it's not qualification anymore. It actually becomes methodology. And so if you think about what MEDDPICC is or what it can be, like that's really down to the organization and the people within the organization and how they want to use it. And we recently talked about this in the context, or I should say the analogy of like phones. Like, I think that the iPhone, it gets used and abused, misused all the time as far as like analogies goes, but I'm gonna use it here anyways. So I think that if you go all the way back, like my first phone, Nokia, I think for many people that will be the case, at least from like the generation that I'm part of.
What are you talking about? Yeah. I'm like, never heard of this.
Yeah, well, what you could do with the phone was make calls and send text messages, right? And so
and have a long battery life.
Oh yeah, like a week maybe.
Yeah.
And play Snake.
That's I think I was quite good at that. Anyways, we're digressing. But the thing is like that was great then. And so if we put that back into the context of MEDDPICC and go-to-market teams, it's like back then it was mostly for qualification, right? What are the things that we should be focusing on? Not necessarily how, but it's like uncovering gaps, right? And so, and now it is so much more, but only if you have the open mindset towards it and if you actually let it be.
Exactly right. Yeah, and I think one of the things that like we're sort of doing this thing at the moment, which is just proving the power of the common language, because we're moving around lots of different examples. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was you mentioned early at Sprinklr, early at Datadog, and those two companies are probably in terms of people 4 or 5 times, maybe even more times the amount of people, maybe even 10 times the amount of people at those companies as when you first started, right? In terms of people, I don't know about turnover, but so much has changed. But the thing is, if you think about a common language and how you were using it in those organizations to how they use it now, it's probably a little bit different. But that's the versatility. And what I would probably imagine, you tell me if I'm right here, is that in those early sort of startup scale-ups, where you are maybe not necessarily creating a category, you could be creating a category, or you could be pushing in, you're expanding a category. I think like Sprinklr didn't create social media software, but they were certainly expanding the boundaries and pushing into new territory there. And so you are using you have to be very proactive, almost a bit like what people would talk about in the challenger sale, without the kind of robust sort of you're wrong, I'm right kind of mindset, but that kind of leading with thought leadership of here's what we're seeing, here's the pains that we're seeing in the field, here's the value we're seeing in solving those pains, which is quite a lot different to how I imagine those organizations are selling today, because it's so much more of an established category.
Yeah, I mean, today and the last 4 years, I've been working with companies that are more like the Sprinklr and the Datadog of the time, right? So we're building a go-to-market. There are a couple of things that you guys mentioned that I want to talk about that I think are very important. These companies are doing, we're MEDDIC companies. And MEDDIC companies, and we've talked about this, and you're like, oh, I know how you feel about people who do not come from MEDDIC companies. And, and it's like, it's bottom up and top down, and the leadership has to embrace it. But what does this mean? You can't do MEDDIC if you don't have that one thing. We were talking about it last night. There's a big issue about people wanting to go into MEDDIC as a common language, and they haven't taken the time to write down the decision criteria. So I still have people saying decision criteria is price, and I'm like losing my... Yeah. And no, it's not. And then sometimes I have to spend half an hour, 45 minutes, even with the leadership, to tell them, no, it's always value. So what are your differentiators? How do you differentiate today on the market? And sometimes it's not feature function. Sometimes, and in the case of Sprinklr, like you said, it was definitely holistic. In the case of Datadog too. So I'm going to give you 2 examples because they're very important. I think you can't go into MEDDIC if you don't understand that you need your differentiators. You need those differentiators to solve pain better than anybody else. And you need to know who at that moment is the right customer, because as you say, they're not the same companies they were back then, 7 years ago. Yeah. Time flies. Because they're scaling. So they win their early adopters, and they keep on moving, and then they reach out. In the case of Datadog, I guess, mass market, right? But back then, they already have that strong story, strong differentiator. In the case of Sprinklr, like you say, remember, we had about 3,000 competitors. Can we talk about this?
There's 3,000 that began with the letter S. Do you remember that? There was like so many. There was like Shoutlet, Spreadfast.
So
like
many.
Yeah.
Hootsuite. Yeah. And what Raji did at the time that was genius was that we're not competing against these guys because we're targeting the enterprise. So if you had a small brand or a small company and they had low maturity and they didn't have the need, we would not go after them. We would not go after them back then because they were not our market fit. Problem market fit. What was the problem was we were fixing, we were giving a platform, an entire suite. And that was not like a feature function thing, because if you were taking the modules back then independently, they might not have been like the greatest. But as a suite, as a platform, nobody else could do it. Some people, they tried integrations, they tried partnership, but nobody could technically have all the information to do customer experience the way we did it. And that was the differentiator, that was the go-to market, and that was the value. So when we talk about metrics, we try to go for return on investment, which is what a lot of companies are trying to do. They're trying to come with Excel spreadsheet and calculate things. And CFOs, which are most of the EBs nowadays, don't care about that. But if you come with true metrics of, okay, this is how you used to do it before, how long, how many people, impact on delivery, impact on go-to-market strategy, and this is how we do it now, this is very concrete. So the essence of all of these companies is to sit down and say, hey, what are our decision criteria? And if I can say this to everyone here, if you think it's price, you got it wrong. So value. And a lot of people say, well, we say no champ, no deal, no pain, no gain, so there's no budget. But I see that we say this because we've always been in companies that had done the work. They had done the work of getting their differentiators, getting their story right. So we always were like, oh, what's most important is champion and pain. And I still think champion and pain are important when you've done the decision criteria work.
Yeah, because you can be the best salesperson in the world with the best product, selling to the company that needs your product more than anything else in the world right now. But if your competitor has set their strengths as that prospective customer's decision criteria, you're playing a game where the rules are written towards your competitor winning. You know, you're not playing. Yeah, it's like it doesn't matter how good you are, how good your product is, how much the customer needs you. They're judging you based on some criteria that doesn't support your strengths, and in this case, what's best for them. So I absolutely agree.
We changed, I can't name the customer, but we changed an RFP written by them. It was not written by the competitor, but it was written by them. Mm-hmm. And we changed it twice in our favor. And I remember they said, oh, if you want to get in, you have to send a proposal for $50K. And I was like, no, we don't even know what we're talking about. And when we did the presentation, we did the Excel and for the RFP. And when we went into the presentation, we changed the game and we changed the story. And we opened up the story towards what it would be like from a customer experience. So where they wanted to do like publishing, that were their decision criteria. So I think we forget that we can still influence the decision criteria, and the story is important there.
Yeah, I talk about this a lot with the likes of organizations we know, great organizations like McKinsey and Bain and all the super smart management consultancy firms who will not engage in the same way as we as salespeople engage without at least CEO executive sponsorship for their work before we're not even talking about them doing the work. We're talking about their turning up for that first meeting. They won't do it, and then everything from then on, as much as they can, they're going to be charging for. But if you actually were to sort of zoom out and sort of get some people with zero context of our industry or anything like that and say, here's Caroline selling sprinkler, for example, to L'Oreal, and here is someone from Bain talking to L'Oreal around the importance of customer experience in all these new channels. Tell me about how those two are different. And someone has zero context of management consultancy, SaaS, anything like that. I think they'll struggle to really separate the two. And if you then said, well, that person's charging like $1 million just to give the information, and that person's actually giving all that information for free. Yes, at the end of the day, they're going to want them to buy some technology. But as you can see from the engagement, that technology, they're going to spend 1 and they're going to get 10 back. The person would go, why? How does that person get to charge? And why doesn't that person charge? Why don't you charge? And that's like this weird sort of scenario we've got in, because we've almost been sort of, as an industry, so almost apologetic to sell, because a lot of the time we are, as an industry, selling bad. We're just kind of going in and just trying to rush to the demo, rush to the the POV, all that sort of
pushing a product, pushing features, functions, not being the trusted advisor. You should be the consultant, right?
Exactly.
I think I remember back then, and we keep on talking about sprinkler. It must be boring for Pim. It's like a reunion, and Pim is like, "Hey, I wasn't there.
I wasn't invited to the party."
So back then we had a chat. I'm not going to name it because I don't want to promote any specific chats, but we had a chat that was a worldwide chat, right? And there was a thing about, and I think that's what made sales back then passionate about their job, is that social media was such a bubbling industry. It was changing fast. You had a chief digital officer putting programs in place and so on. And so we had a bunch of people who were passionate and sharing articles so that we could always be the expert of our field. So, for example, I was coming from BMC, which, I was selling IT, and I was definitely not doing SaaS, to this, rocket ship that was Sprinkler, meeting with CMOs and, all the sparkles and the nights and everything, and you had to be relevant. And I remember it was like being educated consistently, because you had so many people sharing about their industry. And this is what I say to people, is like, try to be an expert before you trying to be an expert in feature functions. You got pre-sales to talk about technique. What you need to talk about in the first meeting is storytelling. You've mentioned that. You've said storytelling. I want to go back on another thing that is important to me. You said people still want MEDDIC as a qualification framework. I disagree. Okay. Because if you qualify with MEDDIC, that means you're already into that motion of, do I have all the information? You're almost like, I'm going to shock you right now, but I think you're doing a band.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you're going into using 100%. MEDDIC as a qualification framework, you're going at it like, okay, do I have my pain? Do I have my champion? And you're taking it with the wrong philosophy. If you're saying, okay, I know that this client, value pyramid, I know you guys have launched that. So I understand this client. I'm like I'm thinking they might have these pains. I'm going to create some strong discovery, challenger sales type of methodology questions where I'm going to take them on a story. I will go to their pains and I will build my champion and will influence my decision criteria. Then you're doing it right. And then you take it from there and you consistently use MEDDIC as a compass to see where you are and how much control you have within the opportunity to take it to the finish line. But I think if you take this as a qualification framework, you could do bandits the same.
I think in both this and everything that you said before this, like there's a big piece that goes back to like the mindset and the way that the leadership thinks about these things as well, right? Because you were talking about like, hey, top down, bottom up. And when I was still like a customer here, like I experienced that firsthand, because it makes a big difference how like the senior leadership team is thinking about it, being bought into it, and are committing to it as well. And to your example about decision criteria, it's like, are we in a mindset of like, no, we know why we win, so we don't need to spend much, time and efforts there. Or like, no, there's always room for improvement. There's always like the next level. We can always unlock more potential. And for me, like that's a very big thing. And we were in Vegas a couple of months ago, and we were talking about decision criteria in particular, about many things, obviously, you know us, right? So, but decision criteria specifically, and we came up with the concept of 3-dimensional decision criteria. A bit like a reminder and a bit like a thing to make people think, like, what does that mean? Because to your point, it's not pricing, like it can be a small factor in the economical decision criteria, technical decision criteria, table stakes, and then there's like relationship criteria as well. So as a seller, you want to cover all of them, right? But if you go back to something that you said, I think about 10, 15 minutes ago, if you want to do this at large, and if you want to help an organization to unlock those next levels of potential, you do need the entire organization on board. Like how many examples have we seen where like the starting point of an organization is relatively similar, but like the commitment of, the collective made all the difference, right? And not only in the success, but also the time that it took to get to success, right? And so I think that if you put this into the context of like, hey, what is MEDDPICC? Like it's a lot of it is depending on how you think about it and how you apply like a growth mindset to it.
If you go back to decision criteria and you have the required capabilities that are the neutral version of presenting the differentiators, right? And if you talk about USPs, so unique selling points, I always tell people like the good salespeople, they're looking for that when they join a company like crack cocaine because because they're going to position it systematically as the strong differentiators. But I also tell the leadership that, it has a lifetime. So you can only be unique for such like maybe 3 to 6 months, I would say, until somebody is catching up on you. Like you say, CPOs are figuring out that they have to catch up. And so that becomes a comparative or a commodity, not so much a differentiator anymore. It's just like it's part of an RFP. So from a leadership team, you have to consistently think about how you're talking about the iPhone. It's like, was there a problem? That you have to picture the problem of the industry, and you can only do this if you understand the industry you're selling to better than they know themselves.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said before and tie two things you said before together. One was around where you were talking about the negative, the infrequent but occasional negative PR that MEDDIC has sometimes, and then you also mentioned about how we were talking about how it's seen as a qualification framework, and you sort of mentioned why that's just a bad way to look at it. I think those two are those two go hand in hand, because the reason why I think some people might have a negative perspective of MEDDIC is because they see it just as and I know this is a term that gets used, the X-ray tool that tells you which are the broken bones, right? And so this mindset of you've got this great tool that's going to tell you which bones are broken. Well, I don't know about you, but if I'm climbing a tree and I'm going to have a tool to help me climb the tree, for example, I want to know which branch is going to break before I fall and break my arm.
I like this
right?
analogy.
You see where this is going?
That's a good one.
And so I want that, because if the bone's already broken, my champion's a faux champion, or I'm losing the decision criteria, or I don't know, the decision process is running away, whatever it is, broken bone, I want to get ahead of that. All of the good selling. If we were to write down now what we think are the 10 best things a salesperson can do, the 10 best traits of salespeople, they'll all align with being proactive, not reactive. They'll all be ahead. They'll be setting the decision criteria, building champions, all that kind of good stuff. And so if you're looking at it that way, that's a bad way of looking about it. And the problem with this is why it goes back to that negative PR that MEDDIC fortunately doesn't seem to have as much anymore, but certainly did have in the past and is still there in pockets, is because people think it's about looking retrospectively back at deals. And so it's like, I'm the manager, you're the salesperson, right? And I'm going to run your deal against these letters that's going to make me look really smart, like I have all the answers, and make you look stupid. I heard this term recently, and I know it's not it's a common term, but I only just heard it, stump the chump. I've heard that a few times. And it's the idea is you basically are trying to catch the person out. And I think that's how it gets used. So no wonder it has.
Because it makes the people, it makes, when you get into that motion, and I think there's something wrong. I've been thinking about this in the last 6 months. We keep on calling them deal review.
Yeah.
And I think there's something wrong about that word, because it really feels like it's a,
yeah, we're like, yeah, no, Caroline, I love this.
So in my mind, right, if you were to do a brainstorming session, let's just call it this way, the manager is creating a trust environment in which the salesperson comes and say, these are my gaps. This is where I'm struggling with this opportunity. This is the ideal word. And obviously, I don't know many organizations that do it this way. It's more like, okay, tell me about your deal. And it's like a reporting session. And the salesperson is trying to justify themselves by just like, I got this, I got that. And I said, stop. I don't want to know anything you've done right. I want to know what's wrong so we can talk about it and we can find good call to actions. But a really good session is somebody who's got a list of call to action this long and is like, I had like some salespeople saying, my phone is burning in my pocket. I need to call this and this person because I know it's going to really give another push to this opportunity. This is what we want. We want people to be so exciting about going back to the field. But as you said, it really depends who you have in the room and how they do things. So I'm screaming bloody murder when I have something like, who's your champion? It's like, oh, what?
Yeah. And I it's funny. The reason why I looked at PIM them is because I feel exactly the same about deal reviews and the terminology.
Yeah.
And I'd previously said, I don't know if you remember, I was like, this is a hill I'm not going to die on.
Oh yeah.
But now I'm feeling like I might get back up on that hill if you're with me.
Yeah. I mean, I've been starting calling pretty much all my sessions, whether they're office hours, whether they're like CEO consulting hours or anything, I call them brainstorming, because I feel like it has to be an exchange. It has to be like, we create something, we build something, right? Yeah, I think there are a lot of people who are extremely frustrated, but then again, there's something we have to say about MEDDIC. It requires work.
Yeah, but I say about the review thing as well is a review. If I go to a restaurant and I leave a review, I finished at that restaurant. If I go to a hotel, a holiday, I leave a review. It's final. Your point, your brainstorming, we're just getting started.
Yeah.
And the other thing,
and it never ends. Remember, because when the deal is closed, there are some people who are extremely frustrated. The deal is closed. They've done all this great work of building champions, and then they have to give it away. Sometimes, like they give it away to customer success or something new that I'm seeing where they're separate with key account manager, whatever. So they're giving away all their work to somebody else, and there's no transition. It's very sad, right? So deal review don't make sense, especially if it's a customer life cycle.
It is, yeah, exactly. And MEDDIC lives throughout the customer life cycle, right? And the
beauty,
and even outside of the sales cycle, everything changes. We've all been in deals where we've been doing the best job we can, and we've been doing a good job, right? And something's changed out of our control, right? And if we, as so many people do with MEDDIC, we're like, well, no, that's my champion, and that's the economic buyer, and that's the decision criteria. That's it, done, check, on to the next. We're going to fail because someone else has come in, whether it be a competitor, a new stakeholder who has a different view, different pain, different decision criteria, they might have had a bad experience with our company before, might have had a great experience with someone else. Everything's changing all the time. So to your point, it is, of course, lives on throughout the customer life cycle, but even the sales cycle, it goes on.
Oh, yeah.
When it goes something was that you did the click, like the checklist. It's really interesting because how many deals, think of all the deals that you've done in the last 10 years. How many deals have you closed and you were really proud of it and you were telling the story where you had a complete MEDDIC?
Good question. No, like you of course you've completed, if you want to complete it, I suppose, where you would say, I feel like I have consensus on everything. I feel like everything was confirmed and qualified. I think it's virtually impossible because
it is. So it cannot be done that way. That it proves that, it proves that if we do it as a reporting, it's green. First of all, you're going to fool yourself. You're going to fool the entire company because you're not creating value into like, that's my champion is in green. So are we going to stop developing and testing? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, but it goes back to something that you were saying just a minute ago. Like salespeople who enter the session by default, if they are not sure what the expectation on them is, and they feel like, hey, the onus is on me to make this a success, and therefore I need to show up, making sure that everybody sees that I'm doing a good job, that I know everything that's going on here, what we're solving for, and all of those things. And, I would be lying if I said that I hadn't been in that position myself. I think I told you a story about a worldwide VP of sales that I had very early on in my career. And I would be like sweating even 2 weeks before he came in for deal review sessions. And that goes back to something that you were saying, like trust. So I think that if you go in with that laboratory style mindset, it's like, no, we're going to find out what's wrong so that we can come up with the right actionable items. That's the way to do it. But that goes back to creating the right culture where that can happen, right? And so that's, again, going back to your earlier
That is
point.
a bigger hill even.
That is a bigger hill. One last thing I'll say on the deal reviews, and then we have to come to our last topic, is around, you talk so many wonderful, beautiful things around deal brainstorms, we'll say that. There's another thing as well, which I think is a wonderful, wonderful output of those sessions, is if you have them as team sessions and you invite in as many people as you can, because we've talked about a lot of different things, product, marketing, SDRs, SDRs coming in, not just because it's a great opportunity for them to learn deal craft, but I've been in so many of these sessions where you've been talking and you start talking about a stakeholder, economic buyer, champion, or something like that. And all of a sudden the SDR's gone, they used to work at ABC, and at ABC, this person also works there. And that person's a big champion for us over here. Because that's what great SDRs do. They know the network. So as much as they're in that deal review, as we'll call it, learning about dealcraft, they also bring huge value to the table. And what you also get is that everybody's learning, because if you take a typical pod of salespeople, there'll be one person that's a real brilliant salesperson. They know the craft. They're just a nerd for it. There'll be someone that knows the space really, really well. There'll be someone that's super well connected. And what you get is basically like a live training session, a role play. It's almost like a role play training session of how can we overcome some challenges we're seeing in deals. Yeah. And everybody benefits from it. And of course, to your point earlier, the person that benefits the most is the person whose deal it is, who comes away like buzzing, ready to go and attack, the field with those tactics they've been given. But it just suits everyone. The idea, anyone listening to this now, particularly if you're a sales manager or individual contributor and your team isn't doing this, get your teams doing it. We'll call them deal brainstorms. We'll coin that phrase now.
Remember at Sprinkler, I used to build clinic. We used to call them clinic so that salespeople could help one another. I want to go back on this. So yes to the pod. Yes to the yes of the pod. Yes, to bringing in people from outside the sales organization, pure sales organization like marketing and product. Obviously, customer success, even though customer success is not yet working on the account, because I have people say, oh, but I'm not on the account. So what? You don't have a brain? Bring in it. Yeah. But I limit it to 5 people. And the reason I do this is because when you have too many people, some people, if it's like a virtual meeting, they have their camera off, they're doing something else, and it drags down the energy. Yes. And I say, if you come to this session, you have to feel how lucky and grateful you are to be in the session, and you have to give back to the salesperson who's giving you a deal on a platter to practice. The other thing is, if you record it and you have a good team internally for like the people we're talking, so I recommend to record the sessions and then give it to the enablement team so they can take like the mini snippet of things that could be used in enablement, because this is like in onboarding session. There's nothing better to understand what was said on a deal and what a call to action when you don't have a champion. So that's like super powerful.
And I'll take it back to the common language, because imagine the enablement team trying to make sense of some chat on about a deal, some brainstorming about a deal, if you lift the common language away. Because they go, well, you need to go to Steve, right? And then you need Steve's boss, Jessica, needs to approve this, and you need to get them to understand which features and benefits. And then we need to figure out in the timeline where this happens. It'll be going like, whoa, rather than, you need to make sure the champion introduces the economic buyer and they're bought into the decision criteria so we can move forward on the decision process, right? It's like, I loved, by the way, do this. This is a tip for you when you work with your clients. If you're in one of those sessions and they do, someone does a great sort of, okay, so let me just give you a quick introduction to this opportunity. And they do a great introduction and they're using MEDDPICC language. Go, okay, now try and do that without using MEDDPICC language and see how much they struggle to try and describe it. And that's just what we're all about.
Yeah, because that works across the go-to-market team. But even within like the 3 salespeople that you were describing just a second ago, you want to ultimately create that effect that you said about like having the phone burning in your pocket, right? It's like, the person that is driving that deal will walk away with most value, or at least it's likely to be. But by way of having a common language, if Steve is the champion in this deal that is being reviewed, are we still saying that? Yeah, can I? Anyway, yeah, this deal is being stormed, then Barry and like whoever the other person is, by way of the common language, like they can very quickly swift to a deal that they're working. It's like, oh, hold on. Like this is 100% applicable to what I should be doing as well. And that's when the phone starts to burn, not the Nokia, the iPhone.
Yeah, right. So we're right at the end now. This is like anything when you're having fun. It's flown by. Yeah. So I'm going to put a question to you. What is, if you had an opportunity to talk about one element, letter of MEDDPICC, which one would you talk about and why?
I mean, we've talked about many letters, but I want to go back to champion and same as we've said, MEDDIC nowadays is not the same MEDDIC as when it was created in the 90s, because we're in different speed and different type of companies and so on. I think it's the same with champion, and I want to say that there are different champions that you need to know of. Number 1, procurement. We are actually on the field seeing that you can create champions if you go to procurement very early on, because they are reverse salespeople. So if you create a friendly atmosphere with them, they can actually be true champions. Number 2, I've started make a difference between, because we usually have several champions for deal over 200K. I started using names for different champions. So I will differentiate the operational champion with the deal champion, because I've seen, and actually we've saved and created more budget by seeing that a lot of people nowadays confuse the economic buyer who has the final yes with the deal champion. And what is a deal champion? This is actually something that I first experienced back in the days of BMC, is somebody who knows how to talk to the EB. So I would say that, I'm sure that if the old guard, as I call them, is looking, they're going to scream bloody murder at me. But I am living proof that you can do deals without ever meeting with the EB, which was how it had to be done back in the days, as long as you have access to the EB through the champions. And the deal champion is very important because you can't confuse champion and EB. That you could lose a deal just on that. And so in the word of CMOs and so on, a CMO can have the budget. They can be the person who signed, but we all know this is not the EB. So asking that question is like, who do you have to present this to get the final approval is essential to make a difference between the EB and the actual deal champion. So I think there's a lot more to be said within the champion evolution of things in 2024. There's a lot more to be said about it. And the last one I want to talk about, but you guys are going to roll your eyes or something, is like, I keep on seeing people telling me, oh, my champion. So Danny is my champion, and Danny this and Danny that. And you know where I'm going with this. And so who else are we talking to except for people, if you're talking to only one person within the company, this is not a champion. The metrics are behind this. You have to talk to at least 3 to 5 people outside of Danny to know that Danny is a potential champion, right? So there's a lot to be said about the champion, because no champ, no deal.
Yeah, of course. And like even if Danny is this unicorn that doesn't exist, right, who can just be the one person you talk to, things happen. Things happen in deals. People leave companies.
So one source of truth.
Yeah.
How do you know that the pain of Danny is the pain of the company if you can't double check it with other people?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or
right.
triple or
Yeah, exactly right, exactly. And what I love about what you're saying there, and I totally agree, and we see it the same way, of having sort of different, almost like flavors and responsibilities of champions. Like, we see so much now of the cloud marketplaces, right? And the cloud marketplaces are being where a lot of big deals are being transacted. And it's like, well, if you're a sharp salesperson, if you're selling to a big organization, particularly one that has a cloud commitment with a Google, an AWS, or a Microsoft, then if you know that, inside of that organization will be a cloud champion for you, just waiting to be activated. Somebody who's there, who's responsible for the relationship with AWS, for example, who loves it when you transact through the AWS marketplace because it goes towards their committed spend and they know what a great seamless experience it is and all this good stuff. So if you're a proactive salesperson listening to this right now and you're saying to an organization who, for example, has a relationship with AWS, as so many of our prospective customers will do, inside of that organization, there will be somebody who is just waiting to be activated as a champion for you because they will see transacting your solution through the marketplace as a good thing for them, and that will help you get so much of the good stuff that Caroline just said there.
That's why the procurement person that you mentioned wins as well, right? So that's I think one of the big things that you're saying, like, it's not a singular thing. It's multiple champions, right? Especially as you look towards bigger deals. And I think this might be by way of you both, going back in time a little bit. So I'll try to tag on and do the same here. Because once upon a time, I was your champion.
Yeah, that's
right?
true. Yeah.
And I think that companies typically have a pretty good idea about, hey, this profile, this role, this is what a potential good champion looks like for us. So this is what we will target in our PG, in our pipeline gen, efforts. And I think I wouldn't necessarily be your typical champion persona. So my point is you typically do look for the right role, but if someone steps up, you want to qualify them against what we know are the 3 traits of a champion. And so your point's if you're just talking to that person and they're nice to you, you can fall into the trap of having happy ears. Probably not your champion, right? Maybe a coach at best. They can still be helpful, but you need someone that is getting you access to other potential champions, ultimately the EB, etc. So I guess my point there is look for that person. Sometimes they will be not your typical role, but they can still be a champion.
For sure.
I think that the conclusion is, don't always try to find champions in the buying persona, but find your champions in who is actually having the pain.
Yeah,
so if I'm to give you a concrete example, let's just say I'm a solution in HR to help you recruit faster. So my buying persona is HR. They're the ones who are doing the RFP. They're looking at feature functions, price, and so on. But who has the pain of recruiting? The director of sales, the head of the factory. These are the people you go see and you find their pain. They're not like recruiting fast enough, and they are going to put the pressure on HR to work with you faster.
Yeah, and then what you really want to understand is how they win, right? Because if I go back to my example, it's like, did I really experience the pain that we were looking to solve for at scale? Well, to a degree, but mostly I was like, I had a very clear vested interest because I saw like a potential wider initiative that I could attach myself to that would mean, well, that I thought at the time would mean great things for my career and my development. And now I'm here in this seat. So I think it played out nicely, but that is the thing, like, the thing that you really want to understand with your champion is like, what is their vested interest? Like, how do they win when you do?
Wow, that time flew. Thank you so much, Caroline. I think this is going to be one for the ages. It's been so long overdue, hasn't it? We've been talking about getting you in the MedMen studio for 2 years, pretty much since we must have started the show. Straight away, I think you were like, I want to be involved, and we were like, yes, that's brilliant.
We were talking about what character for a long time.
Yeah, and I think you've nailed it. You've nailed the outfit, you've nailed the style of the era perfectly. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the invite.
Of course, Pim.
Yeah, thanks so much. Like, this was great. Like, as you said in the beginning, we only saw each other for the first time today, but I feel like I've known you for a while. When I first came into this company, we had a couple of meetings, and I started reading your books, who are on our left-hand side as well. So like I feel like I've known you for a while, but it was great to have you here. So thanks for taking the time and have this conversation with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.